Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Hope you guys have had a great day. I've been waiting to do this for a few hours. We had those line of storms that devastated Alabama today roll through, and we had a lot of rain and wind and hail, and it was really a little scary for a few minutes. But the good thing is when it hailed for a solid 10 minutes, it dropped the temperature outside 20 degrees or so, which has been nice. Having Grammy here and the heat set on 74 around the clock, ooh, your girl's hot. I'm just saying, and not like in a good way. So anyways, all right, music fact of the day. Before we jump in, Van Morrison's song Into the Mystic might be my favorite Van Morrison song of all time. I'll just go ahead and say it is. But it's about a sailor who's at sea, and he's thinking about returning to his lover, who is obviously back on land. Now, usually a foghorn is what signals danger to a sailor, but in this case, it means he's close to home and seeing his love. Isn't that sweet? Love that song. It's great. All right. So Bryan Kohberger, he was in a court today, and he waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing, which has been scheduled now for June 26th and could last anywhere between 4 to 5 days. So they blocked that whole week off to hear this. A lot of people have asked today, why are we waiting so long for a preliminary hearing? I mean, there's 4 victims in this case. It's a massive case. There's going to be terabytes and probably multiple terabytes of discovery in this case. There's a lot of stuff for the defense to get. There's a lot of stuff for the prosecution to put together to get this bound over for trial. So usually it's in a case of this magnitude, I'm not surprised. It's going to be months down the road, and get used to it, y'all. It's a long road to justice. Unfortunately, I don't see this thing going to trial anytime soon. But according to people inside the hearing, he was not handcuffed, but he was shackled, and those shackles were quite loud when he walked in the room. Now, also, he had scratches on his face, and they were new. So there was a little bit of buzz right after the hearing online about what happened. Did somebody get a hold of him? Well, a razor did. And so they have these anti-shank razors in jail that are just a single blade. They're a little bit flimsy. They bend easily, so they can't be turned into a weapon. And apparently the dude forgot, he's having to learn to shave like he's 14 again. A little ironic, don't you think? Anyways, so yeah, it's one of those things that we just have to wait. There'll be hearings in between now and then, but we want to get this thing bound over to trial. Let's give the state all the time they need to get everything in line to get this bound over. And also, you guys have pointed out that in the discovery, which we're going to go through a list of what they have asked for, what the defense has asked for, it was something about statements by co-defendants. It doesn't mean there's a co-defendant or will be a co-defendant. It's pretty standard language in this kind of a filing to just put that in there. But they've made pretty clear that he's the only suspect, and they do believe he acted alone. So I wanted to clarify that too. I don't know if I put that in my notes. I might be repeating myself. But Brian Entin spoke to Bryan's Pennsylvania public defender, Jason Labar, who said there's no way that Kohberger is going to get a fair trial in Moscow or even Idaho. I think there's a good chance he will get a fair trial. People are not like us who follow true crime. There are a lot of people who have no clue about Lori Vallow or some of the bigger cases we followed. I can't believe how many times I've had to try and piece together these complex cases to people who have no clue. Murdaugh, talked to several people lately who really just did not know. They thought it was kind of a lawyer that got in trouble with financial stuff. Some people didn't even know there were murder charges. So, it's easier than you think to get people who don't know much, but Moscow is a very tiny community. So we'll see. Although, you look at the George Wagner case, they didn't move that out of Pike County, and it was a really, really small population there. So we shall see. So there was a filing for discovery by the defense, and it was pretty standard. Just statements of the defendant, statements of the co-defendant, the defendant's prior record, documents, and tangible objects such as books, papers, documents, or photos Reports of examinations or tests, whether they're physical, mental, or scientific in this particular case. Written list of names, addresses, and phone numbers of people who may be called as witnesses. Statements made by the prosecution witnesses or prospective witnesses made to the prosecution. Written reports from expert witnesses, including their qualifications. Police reports, including rough notes or field notes of agents, officers, and investigators. Unredacted digital media recordings, audio, and video. If it's redacted, explain what was redacted. Search warrants, all affidavits, declarations, and materials in support of the search warrant, and all returns and inventories. Exculpatory evidence, documents of payments, promises of leniency, preferred treatment, or threats made to prospective witnesses. If the defendant was identified by a lineup, a show up, or a photo spread, and names and addresses and telephone numbers of identifying witnesses should be turned over to the defense, as well as copies of all recordings related to electronic surveillance. Drug tests, copies of all subpoenas issued by the state, served or not served. Certification of all officers that may be called as witnesses. So all pretty standard stuff, I think, and that's where all this is going to begin. They're going to start getting all their discovery, and the defense will see how bad it looks for their client, and the state's going to put just enough on the table to get this over to trial. We won't hear the ace up the sleeve or the big evidence. It doesn't take much to get it bound over. So they'll do just what they need to do to get Kohberger to trial, which I do not think will happen anytime soon, by the way. It's just a big case. 4 victims, lots of stuff happening. So Murdaugh, we're going to move on. Buster Murdaugh, which is Alec Murdaugh's only surviving child, has settled that wrongful death lawsuit with the family of Mallory Beach, who was 19 at the time she was killed in a boating accident where Paul, as we know, was drunk and driving the boat. He had actually used Buster's ID to buy alcohol since he was underage at that Parker's convenience store. So she was thrown from the boat and not found for 5 days. And 3 other surviving passengers on that boat were included in this settlement. The negotiations, they've been ongoing for a while. They had a mediation that was unsuccessful, but while the final amount of that settlement has not been made public, the original filing was for $50 million, 50. And the final amount agreed to is said to be significant. One term of this settlement is that Buster and his late mother, Maggie, who is accused of knowing her son, Paul, was drinking that night, are no longer named on that lawsuit. So that would leave Alec and Parker's convenience stores, which is where he bought the alcohol, as the only ones named in that civil suit. The families also want a financial claim by Palmetto State Bank withdrawn, and the hearing to finalize the deal will be held on January the 19th. So in addition to the judge signing off, I didn't know this, but a probate judge must also agree and sign off. Alec will need to agree and sign off on that settlement too. So Mark Tinsley, who is the attorney for Mallory Beach's mother, whose name is Renee, told Fox News Digital that the Beach family feels very strongly that whatever their faults were, Paul and Maggie didn't deserve what happened to them. They also feel Buster has suffered enough, so it was important to them to try to get him out of the case. I thought that was really stand up, because people have their opinions about Buster. He's never been named by law enforcement. And so, I think that was, I thought that was pretty noble of them to try to remove Buster from this. And also just to get this off their backs and to be done. So, all right, that's kind of it. And I'm still getting ready to go to the Murdaugh trial. I'm really nervous, really excited. And I want to do a kind of a what we know episode before I go down, just about the murder case, the financials. We've done a lot of prior episodes on those, but not really, kind of just one episode on what evidence we know so far about the murder trial. We know that as a busy parent, you don't have time to completely overhaul your life in the new year. One change that's easy to make that will make your life easier in 2023 is Little Spoon. Most of the baby and kid foods at the grocery store is heavily processed and often on the shelf longer than your little one has been in this world. Not cool, and not the quality nutrition our kids deserve. Little Spoon makes everything fresh, organic, and uses absolutely nothing artificial. It's just like homemade, all delivered to your door and ready in seconds. From baby food to big kid, Little Spoon has you covered for years. Little Spoon even hides vegetables and chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and more. Their smoothies come in pouches that make on-the-go snack easy, healthy, and tasty. And yes, I tried one. They're great. Did I mention it comes right to your door? It's flexible, easy, and everything stores in the refrigerator or freezer. You can pick your menu for a variety of foods to introduce to your child. The price is right, the quality is unmatched. So make this year's chaos a little more manageable with time-saving, delicious, and healthy meals and snacks your kids will love. Go to littlespoon.com and enter my code WhatTheWorld at checkout to get 50% off your first Little Spoon order. That's littlespoon.com and enter WhatTheWorld for 50% off at checkout. So that's just coming up in less than 2 weeks now. It's going to be here before we know it. Moving on to Athena Brownfield. I just got a text. Lisa Marie Presley died. Wow. I knew she'd had a heart attack, but I just got a text from somebody that she passed away. Oh, so sad. Man, a lot of tragedy in that family. You know, she lost her son not too long ago. Anyway, so we're going to go to Athena Brownfield. The search continues for missing 4-year-old Athena Brownfield, whose sister was found alone, as we know, by a postal worker. She was alone and scared. And so the city has halted all trash pickup until investigators tell them they can resume. There was a press conference today, and police now believe that Athena could have been missing since January the 6th. That's 6 days ago, y'all. It's a long time for a 4-year-old to be, if she's outside. It's been cool there at night, cold there at night. Police haven't verified anything as far as the circumstances of these people that were the caregivers, quote unquote. By the way, this is the caregiver's picture who was arrested today. Alyssa Adams, 31-year-old. She was arrested and charged with 2 counts of child neglect. And Athena and her sister were in the care of Alyssa and her husband. So there's been some stories floating around online about where he went with their children, but nothing confirmed by police. So I kind of hesitate to put it out there. But it doesn't make sense. You just leave 2 kids at home by themselves that young for a length of time. I'm interested to know a little bit more about the backstory on what happened, but police would not comment when asked if the husband would also be arrested. So we don't know yet. So Anna Walshe found out today, I was reading an article, the type of ankle monitoring that Bryan had on was not the kind that shows actual GPS locations. It only showed when he left home. So I was wondering if he was on GPS monitoring, like how did he go to all these places and not get like the probation officer get alerted? Well, that's why. It just tells when he leaves home. And he also had permission that day to be gone, even though he lied. So a friend of Anna's told WCVB that Anna set up all the rooms for the boys at her place in DC, even though they had not even been there yet. And on a weekly basis, she would clean the room. She could not wait for her children to be here with her. So the man who bought the fake Andy Warhol paintings from Bryan sent his assistant to Boston with the check for $80,000 to retrieve those paintings and to pay for them. He said they met at the Four Seasons Hotel in the lobby and he treated her to lunch. She told me he was a nice guy, dressed nice, seemed totally legit. The next day, the assistant was back in LA with the paintings and he could see that the paint was fresh. So he tore the paper off the frame a bit and noticed underneath the canvas had not aged. By the way, if you want something that chills you out, Baumgartner Restoration on YouTube is a channel I love, and this is not like a paid promotion. I'm just telling you. He restores artwork and like cleans up the paintings, and it is so satisfying to watch. But you will notice when you watch this, these canvases age over time due to like the elements in the room, smoke, just environmental stuff. And it was a brand new canvas. It's because of Bryan's such a moron, y'all. I mean, it's not funny, but man, he is just a con man. I can't get over this guy. After Bryan stopped taking his calls, once the buyer realized these are fakes, he called and got in touch with Anna. He said she seemed kind of scared by the whole thing and said, there's no way my husband would have done something like this. So she was the one who actually got Bryan to call him back and worked out a resolution. She was kind and respectful, and I picked up on her being kind of scared by the accusation from my side. In the end, he ended up suing the both of them. But he said, what if she wasn't in on the art thing? And what if she really didn't know who her husband was? And I've thought about this, did she know that he had done this? And I'm going to tell you, this guy is scary. It's scary what he can convince people of. He convinced a court that he was the executor of his dad's estate. I mean, he convinced authorities for a couple of days that he was cooperative. I have no doubt in my mind that this poor girl was gaslighted and love bombed into thinking he was always the victim. It seems like with people like Brian Walshe, they're always the victim. Bad things are always done to him. On yesterday's episode, we talked about the statement that she had put in the letter to the judge in the fraud case about his childhood, saying he was never wanted. They wish they had never had him. So you see how people can just, man, it's scary. You can be married to somebody for years and not know who they are. This poor lady. And as of right now, they still have not found any body parts that I'm aware of. So crazy. The tenants of an apartment that Anna owned and had talked to the Today Show and said that she appeared to be in a hurry to sell assets in the days before her disappearance. She actually sold the apartment that they had rented for 8 years, saying that the unit was sold and closed on December 28th through the 29th for cash. Of course, Bryan was in on that, which got my ears up because is that motive? Possibly. That's 2 to 3 days before she went missing that this cash sale happened. All right, so let's see. Richard Allen, the suspect in the Delphi murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, is due back in court tomorrow. They have 2 separate hearings back to back. So the motions heard will be arguments on the gag order, change of venue, a broad discovery request from the defense, and another defense request for additional funding for investigators. So the preliminary gag order was filed after the November 22nd hearing, went into effect on December 2nd, and I think that was largely due to Allen's attorney publicly talking about the probable cause affidavit once it was released. And for the change of venue request, the defense wants the trial moved at least 150 miles away from Delphi. The discovery request was filed on December the 30th, and they want a list of all witnesses, names, addresses, kind of that standard request like we just read with Kohberger, and also a list of people who may have some knowledge about the case but likely won't be called as witnesses. I thought that was interesting. They're asking for everything but the kitchen sink in that discovery request, essentially. So the 11 o'clock hearing for the motion for public funding for expert witnesses and the gag order will be held under seal. We won't see that. So as of now, the next hearing is a bail hearing on February 17th, where his attorneys have asked that he just be released on his own recognizance or having a reasonable bail set. So lastly, Chad Daybell, his attorney, John Pryor, does not want the jury sequestered, which is interesting, but understandable too. So the filing says the defendant hereby incorporates the arguments made at the hearing for a change of venue and all filings related thereto. The state has failed to provide any rational justification for placing jury members in an isolated environment for almost 3 months. That the court has taken the necessary precautions to limit exposure of the evidence in this matter, and an instruction from the court should be more than acceptable to limit outside influences. So a lot of people were like, why doesn't he want the jury sequestered? This is going to be a long trial, like really long, 3 months, right? 10 weeks at least. I think 3 months more. And the jury sometimes can kind of drop off like flies. People get homesick. They miss their loved ones. They miss their spouses. They miss watching things on TV that they normally watch. It just 3 months in a hotel with, other people that you might not really get along with on the jury. I've seen it happen where when they're sequestered, sometimes they just, I think my appendix ruptured. I don't know. I'm just saying that it's a risk. And what you don't want is to get in the middle of this 10-week trial. And then you got jurors just every other day that are leaving, being taken off the jury. There's just so many different reasons. But it's interesting. Not sure what his rationale is, but trying to think of the case where it seemed like every other day for a while. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I was there. I covered that trial years ago, but I remember it was like every other day, another juror that was sequestered was like gone. We were like, uh-oh, they're going to run out of jurors. They're not going to have 12. So there you go. That's today's episode, y'all. I'm going to go hang out with Grammy for a little bit, and I'll be back tomorrow with another update. Until then, hope you guys have a good rest of your night.